To tell us more about this agreement, but also the opportunities.
So it is quite the agreement, right? This is a process, the Conference of the Parties process, that has been underway for more than 2 decades now. People are familiar with things like Kyoto Protocol, which was in the 90s. Probably also familiar as well with the less successful Copenhagen Agreement, which was in 2009. So what we've got here is an agreement to limit global warming to 2 degrees centigrade above pre-industrial levels, as well with a sort of more aggressive target, in fact, quite aggressive target, to keep it under 1.5 degrees. Now, we're already about 1 degree above pre-industrial levels, so this is actually quite an extraordinary level of commitment. The question is, can it actually be done?
Yeah.
And we'll see about that.
I mean, is optimism the right word here? I mean, how is this different to earlier climate talks?
It depends on who you ask. So my colleagues are actually a bit less optimistic than a lot of what you'll read elsewhere, right? They view this as a fundamentally weak agreement in the sense that it didn't do much different than what was already known. However, in terms of the process, and I think what it bodes for further agreements coming down the line, I think it's worth looking at. First of all credit to France. The savoir-faire with which it ran this process was actually quite exceptional, especially by comparison to the Copenhagen Agreement in 2009. So what happened with France in particular was, well, very, very good classic diplomacy. A lot of very good indication of what was needed, when, where, and how. Also, a lot of meetings face-to-face, more than 100 meetings at the ministerial level. And also, just good management on site. People weren't stuck in long queues. The food was good. Apparently, the wine was fine as well. Also, the heads of state showed up early. So the heads of state came in at the beginning rather than at the end. So what they did is they showed up, revved up the crowd, and then rocked off to do whatever else they're going to do, and left the rest of the negotiation to the negotiators and the diplomats. The last thing to note there is that countries themselves showed up already giving a sense of a commitment. These are the INDCs, which means that the countries have actually said ahead of time what they're planning to do and what they're capable of doing, as opposed to expecting 200 countries to get together and jam a top-down solution onto everybody.
What's the anticipation of Paris working when Kyoto failed?
Well, Kyoto didn't necessarily fail. The interesting thing, though, is that it covered actually very little of the economy by the time you got to 2015, let's say. So Kyoto is a very 90s kind of logic and a very 90s economy globally that it's covering. It really only covered developed countries. By mid-last decade, so 2005, almost the entirety of global emissions growth is happening in countries that are not covered by Kyoto. India, China, Mexico, Indonesia, Brazil. And so there's a need to sort of reinvigorate this process to talk about countries that are both developing and still the largest sources of emissions. I mean, China passed the U.S. in emissions in 2004. So it's, in a sense, not a necessarily impractical agreement, just simply incomplete. It didn't really cover much of the world. Now you've got 195 countries covered. The only ones that are not in there are countries like North Korea and, for understandable reasons, Syria.